DG Anne-Marie, we had quite a few questions yesterday why the Greek flag was flown during the flag ceremony and their anthem played. Could you enlighten us?
You know, it's very important to observe the protocols. And our Rotary International Director, Katerina, is from Greece. She's from Greece.
And she's the director for our zone.
Absolutely, and therefore we had to observe that, and it's so important. So it was a South African anthem, because that's the host country, and we had Minister Mboweni on behalf of President Ramaphosa, the state, and Ramaphosa, and then the Greek flag as well as the German flag from President Holger, and then lead us into the Rotary ceremony.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, welcome back from the break, and we hope you enjoyed the entertainment from the Ndera troupe, the troupe that performed on Friday night at the Peace Concert in Uganda. Our next session now, which is Protecting the Environment, will be moderated by District Governor Karl-Heinz Duisberg of District 9350. Over to you, DG Karl-Heinz.
Water is a basic need for human beings, and without it, a lot of other diseases come in.
The Rotarians in Centennial Central, it was their appeal focus on a disease called Brûlé ulcer. When we partner, we come up with the right answers and the right ideas.
Rotary has provided more drinking sources of water than any single NGO in Ghana.
Committee no yajuma ebe ya nse di Ghana ebe he isuna ma atimi achere amayen.
We have done more than 50 boreholes and have gone into so many communities.
When a Rotarian makes a promise, people here truly believe that we'll keep that promise.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, distinguished guests. A warm welcome to all of you to our session 10, Protecting the Environment. My name is Karl-Heinz Duisberg. I'm the District Governor of District 9350, which covers Angola, Namibia, the Western Cape, and parts of the Northern Cape. And I'm your moderator, MC, for this session. I was born and bred in Germany, a lawyer by profession, but then went into science administration and became the managing director of the German National Center for Environmental Health in Munich. Our scientists studied the effects of pollution to human beings and also to the environment, hence my passion for our today's topic. Today, we are going to hear presentations about some environmental issues in Africa, from e-waste and the circular economy to sustainable and environmentally friendly textile development. It's an honor for me to welcome as our first speaker His Excellency Ambassador Manuel Carvalho, Embassy of Portugal in South Africa, Council of the European Union. Your Excellency, the floor is yours, and we are looking forward to your theme, Time to Deliver, a fair, green, and digital recovery.
Dear President of Rotary International, Mr. Holger Knack, senior members of Rotary, organizing committee of the Centennial in Africa celebration, organizing committee for this event, honorable members of government, fellow diplomats, Rotarians, dear friends, caros amigos e amigas. I am Manuel Carvalho, the Ambassador of Portugal in South Africa. I'm honored and thankful for the occasion of addressing this August celebration, marking 1 century in Africa of one of the world's paramount associations and philanthropies. Rotarians have been a force for good in the world for over a century, starting from relatively modest beginnings in Chicago in 1905. But Rotary International didn't stay there. It grew into a multi-continental presence that congregates goodwill and tries to make things better around the world. And it looks into the future. It's a big part of that future that begins on the 1st of July, when protecting the environment becomes one of the official focus areas for the Rotary movement. This priority matches with our own concerns as a country and as current presidency of the Council of the European Union. Our motto for this semester is time to act for a just, digital and green recovery. From our side, and in good coordination with the presidency's trio, that is Germany, Portugal and Slovenia, and with the EU institutions, we have 3 main priorities. Promoting a European recovery leveraged by the climate and digital transitions, delivering on the social pillar of the European Union as a key element to ensure a fair and inclusive climate and digital transition, strengthening the strategic autonomy of Europe that is open to the world. And these priorities will be developed through 5 action lines: resilient Europe, fostering recovery, cohesion, and European values. 2, green Europe, promoting the EU as a leader in climate action. I'll be back to this. Digital Europe, accelerating the digital transformation at the service of citizens and businesses. 4th, social Europe, enhancing and strengthening the European social model. And 5, global Europe, promoting a Europe that is open to the world. Focusing on the latter, we want to reinforce the presence of the EU in the world, promoting multilateralism and strengthening our global partnerships with Africa, Asia, and the transatlantic space. Africa is once again, a cross-cutting priority, as it was with all our previous presidencies. We understand that with the current treaty provisions, the execution of the external relations are purview of the various institutions, the European Council, Commission, External Action Service, but the contents still must come from the various council formations. Therefore, the African focus appears not only on the external relations chapter, but also in the various sectoral stands in the Portuguese presidency mandate. This includes topics to address global challenges, be they peace and security, energy transition, trade, population flows, or health crisis, such as the one we are currently facing. More specifically, the detailed presidency program includes not less than 32 references to Africa, including topics such as intercontinental submarine IT links, security, energy transition, green transition, trade, population movements, health crisis, the future of the African private sector, jobs creation in Africa, climate change, finalization of the post-Cotonou EU ACP agreement, judiciary cooperation, combating brain drain from Africa, cooperating in higher education and research, including outer space, sports, economic recovery in medium-low income countries, looking for mutually beneficial opportunities in climate change, economic cooperation, inclusive and sustainable trade and investment, energy, stability in North Africa, transition from low development country to middle income, assistance to the African Continental Free Trade Area, accession of Angola to the SADC Economic Partnership Agreement, or the EU-Angola Investment Facilitation Agreement, but also defense and security missions, including Sahel in the Gulf of Guinea, or co-organizing with the High Representative for Foreign Security Policy, the ministerial meeting with the African partners on peace and security. As a specific initiative, Portugal has organized with the European Investment Bank, the EIB, the EU-Africa High-Level Forum on the Green Economy and Investment in Lisbon and online on a hybrid format on the 23rd of April. Green and growth were often seen as contradictory notions in the past, but green growth is precisely what the future is demanding in Africa too. How to move in that direction must be at the center of a crucial discussion for Africa, for Europe, and for the world at large. At high-level forum, we have my Prime Minister, also with the President of the EIB, but also the UN Secretary General and representatives of African governments, the European Commission, the AU, the African Development Bank, and Mr. Mo Ibrahim, founder and chair of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and co-founder of the Africa-Europe Foundation. The EU-Africa High-Level Forum was preceded by an intercontinental dialogue based on a series of events that we call the Green Talks. Those Green Talks took place in Africa and in Europe and constitute an unprecedented month-long dialogue in over 20 locations in Europe and in Africa, in places like Dakar, Harare, Cairo, Addis, São Tomé, Luanda, Algiers, Pretoria, Abuja, Nairobi, Tunis, Maputo, Rabat. In South Africa, the Green Talk focused on manufacturing in Africa for Africa and inserting this under the notion of opportunities in sustainable and inclusive manufacturing in South and Southern Africa. Africa needs to create jobs to insert itself in the global value chains. But if Africa needs to create for itself a new economy, it will have to do it in tune with the realities of the 21st century, including concepts like sustainability, limited carbon footprint, and limited wastage. The climate challenges, of course, aren't only an African issue. That is why the climate imperative is covered in many other dimensions of the Portuguese presidency and of the work of the EU institutions. The most important piece of legislation is indeed the European Climate Law that seeks to implement the Europe-wide goals of climate neutrality by 2050. It's a commitment that was obtained under the German presidency in December 2020 and is now going to be made into law with this European Climate Law. This covers a legally binding commitment to zero greenhouse gases emission until 2050 across all sectors, an intermediate net reduction target of 55% until 2030, and the legislative adjustments and action plans to achieve those goals, and a trajectory to arrive at that goal by 2050. I am happy to note that the Rotary International Movement is joining forces in this endeavor. Let me share a bit of my life. I grew up by my country's southern coast, just a few hundred kilometers from the shores of Africa. We enjoy a pleasant climate that has been becoming warmer with occasional freaky episodes. In my first 30 years, heat waves were a rarity. I remember a big one on that given day in June 1983. In the second half of my life, since 1990, heat waves became an annual phenomenon. Forest fires grew in size and intensity. The 5 warmest of the past 150 years were all after 1997. Average temperature in Portugal was 14.7 centigrade in 1960 when I was born, but it rose to 16.3 in 2017. Much bigger forest fires are a consequence. The worst years in burnt area have steadily become worse at each decade. Erratic events are one of the hallmarks of climate change. And it's not only in Portugal. For example, California had its worst forest fires in 2020, while reaching temperature records having come to 54.4 centigrade that NASA described as part of a long-term trend and probably the highest temperature on record. Australia also recorded in 2019 as its hottest year and 2020 as the worst in wildfires, with 11 million hectares burnt. But then we also saw a few weeks ago the horrific floods, freaky phenomena. And I could go on. So it's urgent combating climate change. slowing down and stopping global warming, cutting CO2 emissions, and defining a sustainable energy generation and consumption path, and adapting our economies and societies to greener ways. Africa can and must be part of this. Despite contributing only 4% of the total global emissions, this is a continent that has its own vulnerabilities in view of extreme climate phenomena, and that in parts of the continent lacks the administrative and governance tools to protect its populations from their consequences. Over the past few years, the policies pursued in the EU have allowed a reduction of greenhouse gases emissions of around 24% in 2020 compared to those of 1990. The objectives for the future used to aim at reducing emissions by 45% in 2030 and by 60% in 2050. But these goals were not sufficient. They have been ramped up last December when the EU target until 2030 was reset for 55% emission reduction compared to 1990, and in view of climate neutrality by 2050. My country was the first in the world to assume, back in 2016 in Marrakesh, the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050. In May that year, Portugal ran for 4 consecutive days on renewables alone. Since 2005, we reduced greenhouse gas emissions by about 22%. With the additional measures in the current National Energy and Climate Plan, we should attain 45% to 55% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Portugal aims for 47% of renewables in the final energy consumption, and at least 80% of renewables in the electricity generation. We are regularly above 50% by now. A big international operator wrote this. In 2018, the country, Portugal, achieved an exceptional result with few equals around the world. The electricity produced from renewables in the month of March 2018 exceeded the energy consumed in the country during the same period. And last month, or at the beginning of this year, in January, renewables in electricity generation was 71.2%. And in November 2021, we'll close the last coal power plant in the country. I believe we'll be the very first EU member to definitely exclude coal from its energy mix. The direction is totally clear. Coming back to Africa, the abundant renewable resources in this continent provide the basis for the development of a cleaner, continent-centered, sustainable way of generating energy. This is wealth for Africa. This potential, coupled with the fact that renewable energy is now cost competitive with fossil fuels, led to more countries assuming ambitious renewable energy plans. If I'm not wrong, Egypt committed to source 42% of its total electricity from renewables by 2035, and Morocco set its renewable energy target at 52% by 2030. And coming back to South Africa, according to a 2020 IFC study, South Africa is one of the 16 African countries that technically could have wind potentials of over 1 terawatt. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was Portuguese Prime Minister as we were launching our reflection on our future greening plans. Recall a few months ago at his Nelson Mandela lecture in July 2020 that we are in danger of a two-speed world. By 2050, we estimate that accelerating climate change will affect millions of people through malnutrition, malaria, and other diseases, migration, and extreme weather events. The green economy will be a new source of prosperity and employment, but let us not forget that some people will lose their jobs, particularly in the post-industrial rust belts of our world. That's why I welcome the occasion of having shared these thoughts with the members of Rotary, and I'd like to encourage the conversation to continue. We are celebrating a centennial today, and there is no better way to honor the past than to prepare for the future with Rotary. Thank you very much. Siabonga, Baidanki, muito obrigado. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Carvalho, muito obrigado. Many thanks for your very informative speech. I trust many of us would like to ask some questions, but due to time constraints, we are not able to have a discussion. Our next topic is the importance of tackling e-waste and enabling the circular economy. I welcome as our speaker Rotarian Bonnie Mbiti. Bonnie Mbiti is the Group CEO of the WEE Center. His background is from the information technology, NGO and service industry. He is an e-waste, recycling and circular economy expert, skilled in law and a global youth leader, an alumnus of Coady International Institute, St. Francis Xavier University in Canada, awarded the top 35 under 35 in Kenya. He is also the CEO of Computers for Schools Kenya, the largest ICT in education organization bridging the digital divide in Africa. Bonnie, the floor is yours.
My name is Bonnie Mbithi. I'm the CEO for the WE Center in Kenya. WE Center, we are an e-waste management company. So our work basically is to make sure that all the e-waste that is generated in Kenya is safely disposed. So in absence of a company like WE Center, you find most of the people will just carelessly dump the electronic waste in the environment. And e-waste is the fastest growing stream of waste, and it's one of the most harmful waste streams. So if that is carelessly thrown into the rivers, thrown to the soil, of course, it causes a lot of damage. So there is damage both to the environment, and there's also damage on human health. So for us as a company, our work is to ensure that all this e-waste that is being generated, and like, for example, now in Kenya, annually, we are generating about 51,000 tons, which is a lot of e-waste being generated. Globally, the globe is doing 53.6 million metric tons annually, which is a 21% growth just within 5 years. So this is something that countries need to take seriously. If you have lack of proper e-waste procedures, which is the case in most of the African countries, most of the African countries don't have proper laws and proper legislation and policies around e-waste management. So one of the things that we do is to ensure that countries are having proper policies to manage e-waste, because in lack of this, that's why you will have the informal sector being very strong. You have guys just buying off obsolete equipment from companies, and then they'll just remove whatever components they need, and then the rest is thrown away. So in circular economy, this practice definitely affects all aspects of circular economy, from even the well-being of people. We are destroying the planet, we are destroying our environment. So we need to have collective action to ensure that the private sector, which of course is one of the biggest consumers of electronics, they also need to take the necessary action to ensure that whatever IT equipment that you have, when it reaches end of life, it's properly taken care of. Of course, e-waste is not just IT equipment or electronics that are dead. We have equipment that have been just overtaken by technology. So if you have equipment that is overtaken by technology and you do not want to use it, when now it comes to disposal, you need to ensure that you use proper ways of disposing these electronics. The illnesses that we currently see all over the world, especially in Africa, things like a lot of cancer, DNA destruction, a lot of brain damage, complications with kidneys and other organs. They are the result of us just dumping these electronics carelessly. For example, in Kenya, I'll tell you, there's a lot of e-waste that goes to one of our best rivers in town, which is the Nairobi River. So you can imagine all these electronics that have been built using heavy metals. And then now we throw them into our rivers, our water bodies. So what that happens is that the moment you use that water to irrigate crops, definitely those crops will absorb the heavy metals, and then the heavy metals will go into the food chain, of course. And then now, as humans, when we feed on those crops, the heavy metals still come to our bodies. Same to animals. If animals use water that has been contaminated by the heavy metals, the same way. And then we go and enjoy our meat for those who love meat. So when the e-waste is improperly thrown into our water bodies, you find that crops will be irrigated using that water. Animals will still feed from the same water and drink the same water. And when those animals take water that has been contaminated by heavy metals, and you go and feed on the same meat, for example, if people, for those who love meat, the heavy metals will still end up in your body. So you find most people, when you go to the hospital and just do a check on the status of certain foreign bodies like heavy metals in your body, you find there's a very high count of those metals. And having those metals in your body exposes you to very many diseases, from cancer to issues to do with kidney damage, brain damage, DNA damage. The countless of illnesses that are associated with improper disposal of e-waste are many. So what countries need to do is to ensure that they have proper laws, they have proper legislation. For example, having in place things like extended producer responsibility, which is the EPR. When you have a proper EPR in a country, it means the concept of polluter principle applies. So anybody who is bringing any electronics to any of those countries is the person that should be responsible for ensuring that they are properly taken care of. But now you have companies building equipment that are not even long lasting, and then the equipment is shipped to other countries and nobody is taking responsibility. So like now we have a lot of electronics that have been dumped across Africa. And most of these African countries don't have proper mechanisms, even the laws and even the technology, because the technology again is another aspect. So you find as an African continent, we have a big problem of those electronics just being here and not holding accountable the manufacturers or the producers of those electronics. When we have laws that hold people accountable, we'll have also the consumers being responsible in what it is they buy, and knowing that what you're buying, the person who has produced or manufactured the equipment is properly taking care of the end life of the equipment. So for us, we ensure that all generators of e-waste, be it government, be it corporates, be it the public, we ensure we collect that e-waste. We properly treat all the e-waste that we receive. And when it comes to treatment, even before you go to treatment, whatever it is that can be reused, you refurbish. You refurbish to extend the lifespan of that equipment. And then it can be either donated or given to another user who needs the same equipment. Because again, the exercise of recycling is expensive, and you also want to extend the lifespan of those products. Then if you cannot refurbish and reuse, now you will go into the recycling, where you will be able to extract components that can be used in the different industries, local industries that we have. Like now we have a lot of things like metal. We work with smelters, they're smelted, they make new metal. Plastic is shredded, it goes back to companies that use plastic to manufacture components. Items like the precious metals now, we don't have technology and capacity in Africa, again, to extract certain components from the electronic waste. So for us, we've had to collaborate with European recyclers who we export to them and they're able to extract. But you see, the moment they're extracted, again, those raw materials are used in those countries. But we as Africans, we are running short of raw materials. And there's a lot of precious raw materials that are found in electronics. So if countries again have proper laws of managing their e-waste, they also have a lot of access to raw materials that they can use. And you can see like now, even with COVID, for example, the prices of many electronics has gone up. If you look at the numbers, right now even building certain products and equipment has become very expensive because we don't have access to the raw materials. But the raw materials are actually there in the electronics. So we don't need to go again destroying the environment by doing the traditional way of mining when we can still mine in e-waste. So there's both positive side of electronic waste management, of course. If it's properly managed, there are more value addition to the economies, because you get a lot of raw materials. You create jobs for the sector, because again you have different players who are involved in the e-waste management business. You want also the informal sector to be able to do the trade. But for us, for example, in Kenya, we've been training the informal sector such that we tell them, okay, we know you earn a living from trading in e-waste management, but earn it in a way that you're safe, your colleagues are safe, and also the environment is safe. Because you have people burning cables, people breaking CRT monitors to extract a small piece of copper. Then they inhale all those toxins and fumes. So you have people whose lifespan has also even been reduced. So you're destroying the health of the people. Like there's a place in Ghana where even children that have been born, they are being born already with health complications, because they've already been exposed, or their parents have already been pre-exposed to the toxins that are found in e-waste. So it's a conversation that really requires collaboration from governments, from consumers, also from private sector. The other thing that we've been doing, of course, is bringing countries in Africa together, so that we don't have countries that are developing in isolation. You want, if Kenya understands matters to do with e-waste management, they also do the same knowledge transfer to the neighboring countries. So for us, we've even established an association of 15 different African countries, all the way from the north, central to south, just to ensure that all these countries really know and they have proper regimes for managing e-waste management, and they also have good technologies that they can also share. Because if you have only one country that is able to manage e-waste safely, there's a risk of illegal trade within the boundaries. When it comes to issues of transboundary movement of electronic waste, we have international treaties that try to regulate that movement, like the Basel Convention. The Basel Convention regulates movement of electronic waste from developed countries to developing countries. For example, now we have the European countries are not allowed to just transport e-waste to the African continent. But you find, again, if countries are not aware of such regimes and such treaties, those things will still end up in their countries. Within the African continent, we have the Bamako Convention, which again regulates interboundary movement between e-waste between one country to another within the African continent. We have so many countries that are not even privy to such regulations and such treaties. So we try and make countries also be aware, because if you don't have that awareness, you end up again receiving e-waste that will come and destroy your environment. So for issues of e-waste, it's something that of course we have to be careful with. We have a huge appetite for electronics. With COVID now, everybody wants a gadget that can be online, or a gadget that they can use to access either educational content or even people working from home. But we are not realizing now what happens to this equipment when they reach end of life. If the research done by the UN, we are doing 53.6 million metric tons annually as a globe. It was projected that by 2030, we'll be doing 74 million metric tons. But of course, now with COVID, those numbers will even shoot up. So we'll have a lot of these electronics just lying everywhere. And unless somebody somewhere decides to act, and these countries decide to act, we'll continue killing our water bodies, killing our animals, and also killing humans. So it's something that is very dear to us as the We Center. And as Rotarians, I feel, being that the environment is one of our focus areas, we need to have more collaborations between players who are doing issues to do with environment, and specifically certain areas of environment that are not being spoken about every day, like e-waste management. So if Rotary can also have such collaborations to advocate and have programs that create awareness. And for us in Kenya, we've already started conversation with our district here, our Rotary district, 9212, just to ensure that the countries within that district are aware about how to properly take care of the electronics. So that as we focus on ensuring that people have access to education, which of course, again, if you're pushing access to education, we're also pushing access to technology. So then people need to be aware that if you're using technology is good today, but tomorrow you also have to take care of these devices. So that's just a short brief of how the status of e-waste is and how serious we need to take it. And I hope Rotarians will take it with seriousness and in our own small way, ensure that even the devices that we have in our homes or in offices, you find out how we are taking care of those devices. Otherwise, we'll be pushing a certain agenda, destroying another sector. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best with the conference, and I hope we will manage our e-waste safely. Thank you.
Many thanks, Bonnie, for your very informative speech, which has given us much food for thought. It gives me great pleasure to welcome my fellow classmate, District Governor Jumoke Bamigboye, who will be the moderator for the panel discussion. Jumoke is a lawyer by profession and joined the Kwara State Judiciary in 2014. She joined the Rotary Club of University of Uyo and the Rotary Club of D-Line Port Harcourt and became the first female president of this club. She later became the district Rotary representative in the then District 9140. She joined the Rotary Club of Port Harcourt Central briefly before relocating to Ilorin. There, she became the first female president of the club. She's a recipient of several district and multi-district awards. She served as assistant governor and lieutenant governor, each for 3 consecutive years. District chair Rotary, district chair Rotary Community Corps, and assistant zonal coordinator. Since 2011, Jumoke has attended all Rotary international conventions and has been instrumental to the chartering of several new clubs. Last but not least, she's a mother of 7 and happily married to Rotarian Theophilus Bamigboye, former Governor Bauchi State and Osun State. Jumoke, I hand over to you.
Hi, Africa. My name is Jumoke Bamigboye, District Governor, Rotary District 9125 for 2020-2021. I will be the facilitator for this panel. I am joined by Dr. Tommy Bonman, Manager Sion Elwandel Note, Elian Wanjiku, Kenyan environmental activist, and Dr. Alex Lenfona, Climate Justice Campaigner. Starting with Dr. Tommy Bonman. Please, can you introduce yourself and give us an overview of the work that you are doing in the environmental space?
I'm Tommy Bonman. I work for the South African Environmental Observation Network, and we are mandated to deploy, establish, and maintain a suite of environmental observatories, both in the terrestrial and the marine environment. So we maintain this in the long term to study how our environments are being changed as a result of global environmental change. And our activities stretch from mainland Africa all the way down to the continent of Antarctica.
Over to you, Dr. Alex. If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself as well?
Thanks very much for having me. The work that I'm doing is as campaigner with a nonprofit organization called 350africa.org, as well as serving as secretary for the South African Climate Justice Coalition. And in both of the roles that I'm working in, the big focus is on trying to build the people's movements that are necessary to push for change so that we can fight climate change, so that we can shift our energy systems away from relying on polluting and harmful energy sources towards cleaner energy sources. And one of the big campaigns that we have is around Green New Eskom, so transforming Eskom, South Africa's national utility, which is the biggest climate polluter on the African continent, which we're trying to turn into a force for climate justice rather than a force of pollution. Yeah.
Elian, please could you introduce yourself and the work that you do as well?
Okay, so I'm very fine. Thank you for asking. So my name is Elian Wanjiku Kleisengavai. I am 10 years old, turning 11. I'm from the Punias Factory. And I am East Africa's youngest climate change ambassador and Kenya's youngest Mashujaa. I fell in love with tree planting when I was 4 years old in kindergarten. We were doing a project on heroes, and these heroes included Martin Luther King, Wangari Maathai, Barack Obama, Henry Moika, Uhuru Kenyatta, Nelson Mandela, many others. I really fell in love with what Wangari Maathai was doing, so I wanted to be like her, and I took the lead. So when we finished school, I went home and I kept on really annoying my mom and pestering her. Can I please plant a tree? Can I please plant a tree? Can I please plant a tree? But she was really annoyed with me. She got really annoyed. She just came to a point where she said tree planting is not a success. So I was like, what do you mean? She just got really annoyed with me. And then she was like, okay, if you leave me, I'll give you the seed if you leave me alone. Weird enough, that seed was an orange seed, and it didn't end up smelling like an orange tree because when it was growing, because I'm sure I planted an orange seed, but it didn't smell like it. So I think that was the change that made me manage to be here today. So far, from that day on, I created my own account on all social media platforms. I made my own account, and I was recognized by many companies like Mtoto News, even a TV networks.
Then Dr. Tommy, just listening to the future, a 10-year-old doing this important work. In this work, there could be a potential for a lot of discrepancies between what the science says and what we believe or what we are taught to believe. What are some of the biggest mainstream misconceptions about environmental protection? I'm sure we want to know some of them.
Yes, well, I think the main, the first aspect is that governments need to, listen to what the scientists have to say. The scientists also need to get involved with the activists and the other environmentalists so that we can talk in a united voice. Because at the moment, people say different things, and that allows governments and the polluters and so forth to get away with what they are doing, and it's because we are not speaking with one voice. One aspect, for example, is the planting of trees, which is excellent because that is something that all governments should be focusing on, is reducing the amount of greenhouse gases we are putting into the atmosphere and increasing the amount of carbon sequestration, and trees do that very well. But from a scientific perspective, we must also be sure that we plant the correct trees in the correct areas. And it's not just, for example, big monocultures of one species of tree, because biodiversity is also important to the health of the people of this planet, and we need to preserve that at the same time.
That is a great segue into speaking a little bit about government's role in this. With you, Alex, in particular with the Justice Coalition, you are going up against a bureaucratic juggernaut that is government, What are some of the challenges that you face, and what are some of the key areas where government needs to play a role in environmental work?
Thanks very much. It's a really good question. I think when we talk about the politics of acting on environmental issues, one element is about making sure that we've got the science in the hands of policymakers, but the other is ensuring that they act. And I think here we need to be clear that there are strong vested interests. The companies that are the ones that are polluting have really powerful and strong holds on governments across the world. And that's certainly no different here in South Africa, where we see that big coal mining companies and those that really benefit from keeping us locked into polluting energy sources are resisting change, are capturing government departments that would normally be the spaces where you would hope you'd have scientifically and justice-informed policy that would respond to the multiple ecological and social crises that we're facing when it comes to our energy sector. And so that's a big part of why in our movement to try and push the likes of ESCOM for change, we are focusing a lot on building the political movements, building the political power needed to really push back against the capturing of our government by those interests that are holding us back from a cleaner, more affordable, more reliable energy future, and from action on the ecological crises that we face and that science is telling us we must act on.
I would like to swing back to Dr. Tommy. With what Alex has said, it's quite clear that large industries and governments have a major role to play. But where does personal agencies come in? What is our individual responsibility in all of this?
Yes, now individuals have got a very important role to play in climate action. And each individual's actions, speaks quite loudly. And the more of us that stand together and refuse to use plastic bags, that use clean energy and so forth, the better, because then it's only when we all have a united voice that governments and big industry actually listens to us. So it's very important that we stand together, but it's also important that we support the young generation, the next cohort of young people, and empower them so that their voices are not only heard, but are also listened to by those in power, because they are going to inherit the planet. And it's important that we listen to their concerns.
Eliane, you've done a lot as an individual yourself. But what are you doing to get other young people like me and other Africans involved with your work and to educate them about the importance of your work? I will want to be part of it, and I know others will also want to be part of it.
I've been planting, and I've gone to 79 schools, and I've been planting seedlings in all those schools to make a difference and to empower the children that are in those schools. I've also been telling people to make a donation on my website. It's www.childrenwithnature.org. There's a donate button. I tell people and I force people, you need to donate this, because if we don't get the seedlings, how will we change the world? And I'm not saying this because I need the money. I'm saying this because the money is going to the trees. It's not going to me. I'm giving my respect to the trees. I'm not giving the respect to myself. Even though I have to love myself first, I still have to love the trees, because what will I live in if I don't take care of the trees? I also do plastic pollution, recycling with plastic bottles. Like there's a time in a park I went to, I never left the park until I had cleared up all the trash I could possibly see. Because, I couldn't bear to sit down and see just plastic bottles all around the place, and I'm having a picnic. Who wants a view? I really want to see beautiful flowers, like birds singing. Yeah, and like butterflies in the air.
Dr. Tommy, Africa has always seemingly lived in a harmonious balance with natural environments until perhaps the establishment of large industries. What can be done to get us back to just innately living in balance with environments?
No, I think it's a very good and valid question. I was part of the IPBES assessment for Africa, the biodiversity assessment, global assessment, and Africa stood out head and shoulders above the rest of the world because in Africa we've always lived much closer to nature. There's a lot stronger indigenous knowledge related to nature. And as a result of that, we've got a lot more natural areas. We live closer to nature. We need clean water. We do not depend on very expensive and fancy technology to clean our water always. So we look after our environment. And as a result, the environment in Africa is reasonably better protected and looked after than elsewhere in the world that is much more industrialized. So looking forward to the future, how can we on this planet live better? I think Africa is a potentially good example of how we can do that. Definitely, there's a lot of areas that we can improve. We definitely need to stop the destruction of our natural environment, but Africa can definitely set the example for the rest of the world. But I'll invite my other panelists to also give their comments.
Alex, would you like to add to that?
I think this is really important. When you look historically, Africa hasn't contributed majorly to issues like climate change. I think South Africa is a little bit of an anomaly here, where we're one of the biggest polluters. But for the majority of African countries, we haven't contributed to climate change as much as countries in the global north historically have. And so that means, that on one hand, we need assistance to deal with the impacts for an issue that we haven't caused as much. But on the other hand, we also have an opportunity to leapfrog or move past the sort of more harmful, extractive and polluting forms of development that other countries have taken. And particularly now with renewable energy costs much cheaper than fossil fuels, with a lot of evidence showing that actually it's not only environmentally beneficial to act on issues like climate change, but is also socially and developmentally beneficial to act in that way, that Africa has an opportunity to both look to its past and to its indigenous knowledge in the present, as well as to look to these technologies of the future to create a form of development that is more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prosperous. And so I think we really do have that opportunity, but I think there's also a responsibility from countries in the global north that have contributed most to the climate crisis to provide funding to assist countries across the continent to make that transition and to also deal with the impacts of the climate crisis that they predominantly caused.
Elian, back to the future. Speaking of the future, what does the future hold for a 10-year-old environmentalist?
Where I think I'm going to go is I want to leave a legacy first. In the future, I want to have a legacy of the girl that made Africa the green continent under the sun. Because Africa is literally the breadbasket of the world. I mean, we are the water well. We are the one, for example, in the UK, where does tea and coffee come from? It comes from Africa. Where does wheat come from? It comes from Africa. I mean, we have everything. And government don't really care about it. They just say, we own this land and nobody can have it. Well, if nobody can have it, I mean, then make a change to it, make it something. Make it able, because I know that there was a problem of climate change and the animals never had anywhere to live. They were being pushed. And all these governments had these natures of showing off that they owned a land, and they're not realizing that the animals didn't have anywhere to live. Elephants were being poached. Yeah, so in the future, I pretty much want to just see every extinct animal back to life, except for dinosaurs. I don't want dinosaurs back, because I think human mankind will just be done in a second. But I just want everything to be back to normal, how it was like in the Garden of Eden, just like pretty green, just everything green. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Africa has developed humongously. We have all the tribes in the world, we have all these indigenous tribes, and we're still able to build, skyscrapers.
Both of our doctors, Dr. Tommy and Dr. Alex, there's clearly a bright future ahead, but some of the issues are current and need to be solved now. What are some of the positives we can draw from now? Are we really winning the fight?
A few years ago, most people didn't believe in climate change. And I think luckily through experiencing climate change themselves, whether it's through drought or sea level rise or increasing temperatures globally over the last couple of years, people are realizing that, this is not a hoax. It is true, it is happening, and that something needs to be done. What I'm very hopeful about is the fact that the African governments have really climbed on board in fighting climate change. South Africa is a good example. We're one of a few countries in the world that invest quite heavily in scientific research to better understand the drivers of climate change as well as the biological response to these changes so that we can be better prepared for the future. And what also gives me hope is the fact that, humanity has stood together in the past, to stop the increasing growing hole in the ozone layer. And we've successfully, sort of fixed that problem, and the ozone is every year getting smaller and smaller. So as soon as there's a threat and the threat is perceived and people realize that it is real, we do tend to stand together. This threat, of course, is much bigger than anything else that we've faced. And the sooner we can all stand together and come up with the correct solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to sequester some of the carbon already in the atmosphere, and to try and reverse some of the changes that have taken place so that we can protect our environment and increase the number of green spaces so that our young people can play in the park and laugh and ride bicycles and enjoy the planet as it should be.
Yeah, thank you. I think yes and no. We're winning, but we're not winning fast enough, is probably how I would put it. If you look to a lot of the science around climate change in terms of how fast we need to act to avert some of the worst impacts and keep warming in line with what has been agreed to under the Paris Climate Agreement, we're not moving fast enough. And if we don't move faster, that means we're going to lock in some pretty devastating impacts. And we already have to a significant extent, right? And so climate change is very much a race, and we're racing against the atmosphere, which is quite unforgiving, unlike politics, which is an art of compromise. The physics of the atmosphere does not compromise; it just delivers warming and impacts. And so, we need to move a lot faster, and there is the possibility to do that. The technologies have developed at an incredible rate in terms of being able to implement solutions. And at the same time, political movements are growing. Pre-pandemic, we know that some of the biggest social movements were young people taking to the streets demanding climate action. Those movements haven't gone away. They've maybe gone into a bit of a digital hibernation or a different phase, as we've obviously had to do things differently from COVID. But there's an urgent need for us to ensure that any recovery from COVID is a recovery that puts ecological and social justice at the heart of it. Because otherwise, the studies tell us that this really is the last window to keep to those Paris Climate Agreement targets. And so if we miss this window, we miss that opportunity and we move on to a much more dangerous and warming world. So we can win, but and we can achieve climate justice in our lifetimes, and we need to. But if we don't push back against the political interests that are trying to lock us into a polluting recovery, then I am afraid that we may miss that opportunity. So the future is still in our hands to determine whether we do that or not.
Elian, what would you like to say to the older generation that are in this event right now, listening and watching you?
I'm not the servant, okay? Even though children can make the change, you still have to do something because you guys, well, you made children, basically, for those who have children. You made them, and as parents, you need to be their warriors, and they'll be your warriors. I mean, children can't always be doing the work. Like, for example, let me say, my mother sometimes, she tells me to plug in her iPad. She tells me to plug in her phone. She tells me to do this. She tells me to do that. And sometimes I just think, okay, I'll do it, but I need to, you know. So yeah, I'm just telling you guys that you also need to protect your world. I mean, it's not the children that are just gonna change it. I mean, we need help. As a lot of people say, we're just children. We're still growing into the humanity of the world. We don't know, some children don't know what the world really is. They pretty much just know the good side of the world, but they also don't know the bad side. So I'm just telling all these old fossil fuels, you need to help us. Like, we need a change because it's your world, not just ours. Like, you're made to be in this world. You have to protect it.
I'm sure you have something to tell us to close this session.
Yes, I can also say maybe, to bring it all back to Rotary possibly. Rotary is a good organization, to take this climate action further because they're a global network. They consist of a network of specialists and professionals, young people and old people, across all the countries of the world. They've got established clubs, they've got established projects, and if there's one organization that can talk with one voice and use all their vast resources like they have in the past to fight polio, they could potentially make a big difference if they unite, stand together and fight the good fight.
Thank you very much, Africa. It was nice listening to Dr. Alex, Dr. Tommy, and Elian on the way forward for our own environment. Thank you.
Many thanks to Jomoke for your moderation and to our panelists for a lively discussion. We are going straight into our next panel discussion, Sustainable and Environmentally Friendly Textile Development. I welcome our moderator, Rotarian Kutai Saritoson. Kutai Saritoson is a textile engineer and sustainability aficionado with a passion for the environmental and social impacts of the textile industry. As CSR Senior Executive at ISCO, Saritoson worked in close cooperation with leading sustainability platforms such as SAC and PCI, as well as prestigious certification bodies of Nordic Swan and EU Ecolabel. His public speaking engagements have included guest lecturing at Parsons School of Design, participating in panel discussions globally, and presenting at EU Green Week by the invitation of the EU Environmental Commission. Mentorship activities have included the CFDA and Lexus Fashion Initiative 2018 and 19. Saritoson currently serves as the Director of Fashion Brands at Blue Sign Technology AG, helping to unite chemical suppliers, textile manufacturers, and brands to jointly reduce their impact on people and environment. Kutai, I hand over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Welcome to our panel, Sustainable and Environmentally Friendly Textile Development, as part of the Rotary Africa Centennial Conference. I'll be your host for this panel, and my name is Kutay Sarıtosun, member of Rotary E-Club District 9400 and Director of Fashion Brands at Blue Sign in Switzerland. With climate change, diminishing natural resources, and environmental issues, sustainability has definitely become a vital aspect of running a business. Textile industry is known to have a very large environmental footprint. So today, we'll be discussing the current status, challenges, and the future regarding sustainability in the fashion and textile industry in general, and also with a focus on Africa. And we'll be hearing the insights of our esteemed panelists. Joining us today is a group of global thought leaders, and I have the pleasure to welcome Anyango Mipinga, Creative Director of Anyango Mipinga and founder of Free as a Human Foundation. Welcome, Anyango. Samantha Pattinson, CEO of Red Carpet Green Dress. Welcome, Samantha. And Skandar Negasi, CEO of Trade and Fairs Group, Messe Frankfurt representative for East Africa and co-organizer of African Sourcing and Fashion Week. Welcome all. So starting with where we are today, let's open up the discussion to the panel. We've been talking about sustainability in the textile and fashion industry for many years now. And given the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, what does that mean to you now? Where do you see the current status of the global fashion and textile industry at the moment? And why is sustainability in fashion important? So Anyango, shall we start with you?
Sure. So in terms of sustainability in fashion, like if we take Goal 8, for instance, it emphasizes promoting sustainable employment and economic growth and providing fair employment opportunities. And we look at the global fashion scene and we see a lot of inequalities when it comes to employment of workers. And that's something that we really need to drive a message forward that something needs to change, right? We need to pay our workers fairly. Sustainability is not just about picking one thing that you think you want to achieve and then saying, oh, my brand is sustainable. It goes all the way down to how you source your materials, all the way down to who you're working with, how much you're paying them, and whether or not they're able to earn a living from producing clothing for you. Because at the end of the day, as a fashion brand, you don't have a brand without the people who are making your clothes.
So Samara, what are your thoughts on that? What is, in your opinion, what's the current status of the textile fashion industry with regards to sustainability?
Hi, well, first of all, I love what Anyango said, and I echo her thoughts very much. I think for me, when I look at sustainability in the textile and fashion industry, I think about the impact that this industry has. And it's so hard for people to understand how huge that impact is. But that environmental footprint comes from, and social footprint comes from everything from chemical use and greenhouse gas emissions to water consumption and rainforest destruction. So we have such a huge impact within the fashion industry, from sourcing our materials across to, as Anyango said, the people that are interacting and creating our products. And this model, this very linear model, isn't really looking like it's correcting itself quick enough. I mean, clothing represents 60% of textiles used globally. And we know that in the next 15 years, clothing production is going to double. So we have this huge footprint that we're responsible for. And when I think about the SDGs and how that ties into sustainability, I mean, Anyango already gave the example of a couple of them, but even if you think about responsible consumption and production, right now we're talking so much about circularity and the need to decouple economic growth from material extraction, because we can't continue with business as usual. And so that's one of the issues for me, that we have a business model that is producing garments and using textiles and using raw materials in an irresponsible way. And to align with that responsible goal, we have to look at reducing production. We have to look at more sustainable inputs in the process of production. But I also look at it from the perspective of materials. Like, we're relying so heavily on synthetics. We're relying on petroleum for materials like spandex and polyester and acrylic, and we know that these are not biodegradable. We know that they aren't aligned with the circular economy in the long term unless we look at responsible production and the solutions for what do we do with the clothes and apparel that we're making once we're done with it. So I'm kind of excited about responsible production and consumption, looking at it from a new business model and looking at it from the inputs that we put into that model. But I think the last thing for me, especially around kind of the SDGs, is this focus on climate. And fashion has a huge input when it comes to actually aligning with the goals to impact climate change. And we know that we would contribute approximately 9 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot of the things I'm passionate about, how do we decarbonize our supply chain from the machines that we use, the sewing machines that we use, the dye processes that we use, the materials that we extract, all the way across to the packaging, etc. So to align with that kind of goal of the climate change action for goal 13, I think decarbonisation is a thing that I'm kind of looking at a great deal as well. So it's all connected. I don't think you can decouple the sustainable development goals from the fashion industry and sustainability, because fashion is a business, it's full of people, and all of these different goals affect us in different ways.
Absolutely. The sustainable textile industry actually should revolve around, as you said, responsible production, responsible chemistry, and responsible use of resources. And how do, once you spend those resources to make the goods, how can you keep those goods in circulation as long as possible? Because you keep using new resources to make new goods all the time. And that brings us to your point that we have a linear take, use and dispose linear model right now, and how can we change to a circular model in the sense that how can we keep the goods in circulation as long as possible, reuse, repair, recycle, right? Wonderful. And Skandar, what would be your take on this? What is our current status in the industry?
Yeah, I can only add to what Samantha and Anyango said. The sustainable development goal here is becoming a darling for the Western countries. It's becoming a trendy word and trendy brand for the Western world. But if you see the African designers, for instance, they have always been sustainable. So they were sustainable by necessity, because they had a lack of resources that the Western designers or companies did not have. They always made sure that they are not creating too much of a waste. So with whatever they had, they were always sustainable in production. So for Africa, it's nothing new. It's a new thing for the Western world, for the Asian world, but not for Africa at all. The good thing is that Africa is now recognized by the sustainability activities that is happening now. And that's the good part for the African industry. When you go to the textile industry, textile manufacturing and apparel manufacturing, you see that Africa is doing that something positive that Asia was never doing. That means you look at the factories that are opening up in Africa. Most of them are eco-friendly factories. You won't find an eco-friendly factory in Asia, for instance. And even the Western countries, the Western sourcing companies, were not interested in the past to source from eco-friendly factories. But the thing has changed, and that's where Africa is coming into the whole game, and that's why I see a bright future for Africa when it comes to design and also manufacturing.
So sustainability is in the DNA of African designs, right? Traditionally, it's been so from the very beginning. And what I'm hearing from you is that now that production is moving into Africa, all of these factories, facilities that are being set up are set up in a sustainable way. So not only traditionally sustainability is in the DNA of the African fashion, but in the modern African fashion, sustainability is the rising star with regards to production and sourcing. Anyango, what's your take on all of this?
Well,
what's the current status of African demand for African fashion and design?
I can only speak frankly from the position of a designer who's in the industry, who's working in the business, because it's encouraging to hear all these idealistic views of what the industry is. But when you really sit down with African designers, you'll realize that it's not as rosy as it looks. We have a lot of retailers who are coming up right now who want to sell our products. However, the terms that they're offering us are terms that they would never offer any other designer out there. So we have to pay attention to that. Because yes, every platform, I can tell you for a fact, every platform that has come up that is supporting African designers has approached me. But are the terms favorable for me to actually manufacture in a sustainable way and sell my products on those platforms? No. So that's what needs to change. If you're really going to invest in designers, you actually have to come in as a partner, right? Because a lot of platforms will come up. Maybe the only model that they're willing to offer a designer is a consignment model. But a designer has to then produce his goods in a sustainable way and meet their manufacturing minimums, right? So is this platform actually amplifying the work of a sustainable brand, or is it just sort of riding on the wave, you know? So there, we do need to look at these things, because at the end of the day, some of the retailers that will offer me the terms that are favorable happen to be the international ones.
Yeah.
And that's the reality, right? The ones on the continent and the ones that we want to work with because we believe in our products and we believe in serving our local communities aren't really offering us favorable terms for retail, right? So for me, I'll be more inclined to work with a buyer who's international, who's going to meet my wholesale minimums and is willing to give me the payment terms as well that I require in order for me to actually produce sustainably. Because remember, for you to be sustainable, it costs you triple to actually be sustainable. You're sourcing sustainable materials, which take more time to make, right? And if you're working with a factory that is looking at the environment and not using toxic dyes, they're not going to give you a cheap product. So being sustainable actually costs more money, which is why a lot of businesses aren't switching to sustainability.
So I'm a former designer as well. I actually am a self-taught designer who was in London, and I basically worked on the business side of fashion, but I had my own clothing label for 3 years, and I showcased in New York with it, and it was a really, really interesting experience, kind of being a self-funded designer that was doing women's wear at the time. And so I do understand the perspective of a designer because I'm a former designer myself. But one of my things with this statement that sustainability is more expensive, I actually like to say, no, sustainability isn't more expensive, exploitation is, because the reality is, first of all, citizens and consumers have a false idea about what the actual true cost of anything is. So when you're saying, oh, I have to pay more for these inputs, which is true, and it's also on the flip side, organic. So I work with all manner of fabrics with red carpet green dress. So I can say, yes, I know that if I get a GOTS certified material, or I get a material that has this certification like Ercotex or whatever the certification is, or whatever that process is, I might say that that's 30 to 40% more on average. That's the percentage you're looking at for that kind of extra level of kind of transparency or cleanliness of the textile or process of the dyes, etc. So there's that. But I also know that if I'm sourcing other materials, for example, a recycled material, that's an inherently less expensive, because the virgin material is always more expensive than the recycled material. So it's also dependent on what you're sourcing. But my thing about this statement around sustainability is more expensive, it really upsets me, because what the alternative to sustainability is subsidized. So what you actually think is cheaper is subsidized off people. It's subsidized off people's labor. It's subsidized off raw material. It's subsidized off farmers or factory workers being paid less than they should be. So we have this idea of this. I would say that this is more expensive because, let's say you're charging me £25 for this T-shirt when I could buy it for £7 here. That's more expensive. But actually, it's not more expensive, because the true cost of what you're buying should be that price.
Whether we like it or not, I'm still being charged more for a sustainable product, for, you know, with that comes with certification, and there's all these implications. It's like I have everything right in front of me. So I'm ultimately going to have to charge my customers more.
Sustainability is not going to be a nice to have for brands in the upcoming years, because if you look at the online platforms, they're now demanding, if you want to showcase your brand on that online e-commerce platform, you have to be a sustainable brand. And each e-commerce platform is measuring that differently. There are different things that they take a look at, but it will be a must in the near future. So, but thank you again for all of your wonderful views. And Skandar, maybe we can continue with you, because you started talking about the African brands, and you mentioned before the situation with regards to African sourcing, and you work heavily in Africa with regards to organizing trade shows, showcasing African brands. So do you see any trends with regards to demand for African brands sourcing in Africa? What is the current situation? What do you think is going to happen in the next 5 years? Like, what does the future hold for African production, African fashion, from your perspective, again, being on the sourcing side of things?
Yeah, the trends I see today, not only at our exhibition, but the general when we speak to manufacturers, designers, etc. There's some of the trends like the local manufacturing industry that will grow up to $930 billion US dollars in Africa very soon in the coming 5 years. And then you have the potential for the e-commerce in Africa from the Africa continental free trade that is over $20 billion US dollars. That is all for the next 5 years. The problem here we see, and the challenges for the African manufacturers and designers is two things. One is the China that is producing and selling in Africa for a cheaper rate. That is a huge competition to the African manufacturers. And then you have the second-hand clothes, which is coming from the Western country. Most of the time it's from US market. And in countries like Ghana, Kenya, Benin, you won't believe, but about 80% of the people wear second-hand clothes that is coming. They buy second-hand clothes. That is the killer for the African manufacturers, for the African designers who are so creative. And then another challenge in Africa is the logistic and the price and the image, which exists even if you produce the best designs and the best brands and quality. The image is still not where it belongs to be in the Western market. This has to do with the media that is happening in the Western market. If you see the media in Europe, the only time when you talk about Africa is when there is a negative news. But you won't see media which are talking about manufacturing and design in Africa. CNN does it sometimes, BBC does it sometimes, but that's all. In Germany, there is no positive news about Africa. That's what I can tell you. But whenever there is a small bomb or there is a crime going on, then you will see something about Africa. So that's an image thing. But now the situation within Africa and outside is changing. That's where I see the positive, the future here is the Africa continental free trade. So within the region, there will be more and more people selling, and this is an economy of about 3 to 3.4 trillion US dollars, and that brings 200,000 new jobs. That's what we see only in East Africa. 200,000 new jobs will be brought in the coming few years.
I'm really fascinated by the numbers that you've given us and the trends that you see. This is really, it's incredible. It really is fascinating. So Anyanga and Samata, just really briefly, in addition to what Skander has said, what are some of the factors that you see to make sustainable African fashion successful? If you had to choose like 3 main factors to make it more successful, what would you choose?
I would say I'm going to point to one because I feel like it captures a lot of things. And if we go back to the SDGs, we look at Goal 17, which is based on building partnerships and collaboration. Mm-hmm. I think we need more of that happening. It's not to say that African designers cannot do it on their own, but we do need to foster an environment of more collaborations so we can all grow together. You know, I've just finished a collaboration. It's launching later on in the summer with a sustainable footwear brand called Vivobarefoot. They're based out here in the UK and manufacture a range of shoes in Ethiopia, where they've trained artisans to make shoes. And instead of them going and maybe, deciding to appropriate, they said, we're going to work on this particular project with an African designer and get inspiration from a culture. So I think we need to put more emphasis on collaborations.
Yeah, as you said, collaborations and partnerships are key in the industry, for sure. And that's also in the Sustainable Development Goals under partnerships for goals. Absolutely. And Samara, what is your take on that? What do you think is the top 2 factors to make African sustainable fashion or sustainable fashion more successful? What would you pick?
The 2 things I would pick would be infrastructural changes. So, for example, for me, textiles are such a huge part of the supply cycle. I think without textiles, we really don't have an industry. You can't make clothes without them. And right now, the infrastructure is lacking that allows or facilitates African countries to go from like the cotton to the actual textile. And I think that in itself is kind of it's a barrier to being able to scale a huge part of what is sustainability. Like, so much of our footprint and our impact on biodiversity is in that upstream stage of production. 70% of our global greenhouse gases come from that process of literally before you even get to cutting, making and trimming. So I think getting the infrastructural support so that countries can actually go from having the seed to producing their own textiles and not having to export that seed or that fiber to another country and then buy back the finished textiles, I think is a huge part of the conversation. Bringing more of the making process into the continent means that you have more control and more influence about how those stages are rendered, from how the cutting, the dyeing, the coloring, all of those stages are part of that sustainability bit before you even get to a finished garment. So right now, I think there's a bit too much of a perception of the continent where designers are seen as and I hate this analogy, but we'll put enough in this designer for them to grow their stall, for them to grow their small brand, when so many designers aspire to be global multinationals or conglomerates. So I'd love the approach towards investing in sustainable brands and investing in Africa to be macro and huge, to really give it the respect it deserves so that it can become, that these brands, these people like Anyango can become those big conglomerates that might have other brands within them, 10 years from now.
This was really fantastic. I thank all of you. And I love that it was, it was a discussion environment and not just me asking questions and each one of you answering for that question. But there was a debate, a discussion, etc., which will definitely be very interesting for the ones watching it on April 25th.
Many thanks, Kutai, for your moderation and to all the panelists for their contributions to this informative discussion. We are now coming to the end of our session. Some of us may wonder why we in Africa should concentrate on the environment while the USA and China are the 2 countries which are main contributors to the world's environmental pollution, followed by the European Union. Africa is the cradle of mankind. It is clear that, from an environmental perspective, it is a rather complex continent with a huge array of environmental concerns. It should also be borne in mind that Africa is in line to experience significant increases in temperature and the human population in the coming years. Maybe this complexity is why the United Nations saw fit to establish the headquarters of the United Nations Environmental Programme in the middle of Africa and right on the equator in Nairobi, Kenya. However, this also means that the latest developments, solutions to problems and guidance on these environmental concerns are relatively close at hand for our African countries. Rotary International has finally decided to have 7 areas of focus supporting the environment. One of our main goals in Rotary is to create lasting change. Subsequently, ESRAC has been established, the Environmental Sustainability Rotarian Action Group, which has already 1,200 members in 73 countries and 290 Rotary districts. Lou Bota of my District 9350 is currently the co-leader of the African Regional Chapter. Of ESRAC's 8 goals, I want to mention enhancing the capacity of communities and local governments to support natural resource management and conservation, as well as supporting education to promote behaviors that protect the environment. We need the younger generation to play the role of a game changer. I have no doubts that we as Rotarians can play a major part in supporting the environment, like we have shown with the eradication of polio. Thank you for being with us this afternoon.
DG Karl-Heinz, that was such an inspiring topic and lineup of speakers. I now hand over to DG Rossetti to do the honors and to recognize those receiving awards under this pillar. DG Rossetti, over to you.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful day. And it's a pleasure to join you this day to thank our moderators and facilitators. Thank you for a wonderful session. I'm sure everybody has benefited from this session on environment. First of all, allow me to extend a word of thanks and a reward that has been given to Elian Wanjuku. Thank you so much, Elian Wanjuku, being the Kenyan environmental activist and being a successful person in that area. If you'll allow me to tell you a little bit about Elian. At 9 years old, Elian Wanjuku has been the driving force behind the planting of 250,000 trees in Kenya. When Elian was in kindergarten, she learned about Kenyan environmental activist Wangari Maathai, who fearlessly defended public land from government's development plans. And through her non-profit, the Green Belt movement, paid women to plant tree nurseries throughout the country. And this is what Elian is doing. Elian found ways to continue that legacy. With permission, she began planting trees in Nairobi's Kaluru forest with friends, and eventually are invited to do tree planting, team building events, and corporate social responsibility activities. In 2016, she founded the non-profit Children with Nature and has set up tree nurseries in 80 public schools in communities where children lack nutritious meals. Through the partnership, children plant seedlings in bags at school. What an innovation. They nurture them, they grow these into trees, and then schools sell the seedlings to the community to generate income. So, what a wonderful person Elian you are. And it's my pleasure on behalf of the organizers of the Centennial celebration today to extend to you a recognition where you have been hereby named a Paul Harris Fellow in appreciation of tangible and significant assistance given for the furtherance of better understanding and friendly relations among the peoples of the world. Congratulations, Elian, and please continue giving to the Rotary Foundation. In the same spirit, I would like to thank all our moderators, all our session facilitators. First of all, DG Dr. Karl-Heinz. Thank you very much for moderating the session in a manner that made us all understand the content. Some of us don't even understand environment, but you made it seem easy through the panelists you have. We have heard from Ambassador Manuel. We have heard from Rotarian Bonnie Mbitha. And in the panel discussion, we've heard from Dr. Tommy Bowman and Elian Wanjuku. Dr. Alex Lefena, you all made us understand what a greener Africa looks like. And the second session, which was moderated by Rotarian Kuta Siritomo. Thank you so much. And that was following after my own friend, Dr. Jomoke, DG Jomoke, did the moderation. you guys do a good job. So we want to thank Rotarian, Kute, Anyango, Skada, Smata, all these panelists did a wonderful job to tell us about how a sustainable and environmentally friendly textile can be developed. I'm so delighted to be the one extending this word of thanks. I will thank you so much for what you have shared with us, and may God bless you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rossetti, for this presentation and also awarding our Paul Harris Fellow. We are delighted to now introduce past Rotary International President Barry Rasson, who will speak to us on the next 100 years in Rotary. Thank you, Barry, for your presentation.
Congratulations to all the Rotarians in Africa. 100 years. Imagine all the good things that you have done over that time. You've changed lives in a very significant way, and many, many lives, and you should be happy and proud to have accomplished as much as you have. Now we look at the next 100 years. How do we get there? What do we do differently? I believe we're at a transition point in our organization. We have to start thinking differently. What should we do differently in order to be more relevant to today's world and the world of the future? Our pandemic has slowed us down, but it doesn't stop us. We still can do so much, and we still need to do so much. We have been the premier organization in the world for doing humanitarian service. The only way we can continue is we must be relevant and impactful by evolving in order to meet the needs of those in today's world. But as we change, remember, we don't want to change our core values. It's still important to have that great fellowship in all of our Rotaract and Rotary clubs. And by the way, we need to work together in Rotaract and Rotary and evolve together. We have to maintain our integrity above all else. Everyone looks at Rotary as the organization that they can trust. We must maintain that. We must continue to improve our diversity, representing all aspects of our communities, whether it's gender, it's age, it's race, it's ethnicity, whether it's the disabled. We need to represent everybody. That way we can truly know what the needs are and address those needs in the way we do it. And of course, service is our core value, and that's what we're best known for. So we have to continue doing the great impactful service that we do. And never forget leadership. Every one of you are leaders. Every one of you has an obligation to keep that leadership going for our own clubs as well as our non-Rotarians, our communities. So important to maintain that leadership level. You know, Arch Klump said that Rotary will not go backward, nor can it remain stationary. It must push forward. So I urge you to make sure that we push forward. But think about where we are today and what we need to change. Think about the organization that we have and the complexities. We need to be thinking about how we make it simpler to move forward. What should we change in our structure? Should we not look at bigger regions and oversee those regions that are culturally similar? Don't lose our internationality, because that's part of who we are, but bring us together in a way that's defined by our cultures and not just by the number of members we have. And speaking of membership, I congratulate Africa for continuing to grow. I still believe, and I've said this to you before, I want to see Africa at the table of the board every year. To do that, you need to grow your membership to get to that position. Then, as you have a seat at the table, you help to get your beliefs as part of that. But think about the everyday Rotarian, the average Rotarian on the ground. Are we meeting their expectations? Are we doing and running our organization the way they expect us to? It would appear not, because we've lost 1,385,187 members in the last 10 years. That's more members than we have today. We're doing something wrong with engaging our members. I ask you as Rotarians, as presidents of clubs, as district governors, think about that. We've lost too many, and it's because we're doing something wrong. We need to fix that. I believe a new structure that involves and engages our Rotarians and Rotaractors better than we have in the past is the way to do that. We've got to increase and continue increasing our diversity with gender. We're only 24% there. Our leaders are still predominantly male. And that's okay, but we have a lot of great women that are not being given opportunities. We have a lot of great young people who are not being given opportunities. Let's make sure we give all those opportunities to all those who are deserving, no matter what their background and who they are. With a new structure, we're able to look at the region. We're able to look at leaders who are going to be responsible for fewer clubs and therefore give them more motivation, more inspiration, more assistance and guidance to developing them to be strong clubs. Think about it. If every club in the world was strong, we would have a much better organization to do good in the world. And that's why we're here. I ask you, think about that. Think about how we do it different. Think about our globe. But I know in Africa, you're creative. You embrace change because you see that's where we need to be. I ask you to think about it carefully. Do what you have to do. Embrace change so that we can see the next 100 years. And when our ancestors look back and say, I heard that back in 2021, they started talking about a new way of running this organization, and that brought us to where we are after 200 years. I know you can do it, and I know you can do it well. I congratulate you for all the work that you do and will always continue to do. I thank you. I thank you for listening today.
Wow, thank you, past Rotary International President Barry. We are not only celebrating Africa's centennial, but we are also looking forward to the future. As we come back from our short break now, we will be in the new generation and youth pillar, whereafter we will again be joined by RI President Holger for the wrap-up of our conference and the symbolic handover of the district governor chain. Enjoy the break.